Today we're fortunate to have a highly skilled player, Boneless, here to share with us the top 10 strategy secrets to improve your Terraforming Mars game now. We'll look at all the essentials including card synergies, timing your play, how to leverage your engine, and the best paths to generate high scores and devastate your opponents. This is Legendary Tactics. Terraforming Mars is the number 6 game on Board Game Geek right now and is consistently ranked as one of the best 10 board games since its release in 2016. Last year, we met a talented Danish gamer, and he's back to teach us Terraforming Mars. Welcome, Boneless.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. Well, I could tell you're a man of skill when I spoke to you about Wingspan last year, so I'm excited to see what strategies you offer us this year. And before we start our 10 strategy tips, though, I want to ask you, why is it that you enjoy this game so much?
It's my own personal favorite game. I think it's so deep. It's like engine building, but like the best kind of engine building. You can like go in like 10 different directions and you have a new game every time, and it's very satisfying.
Oh, that's perfect. Well, we'll get into that in detail very soon. So let's start with our number one. To begin, I think we absolutely have to talk about player count, because in my mind, the strategies of the game depend on how many players are at the table. So can you offer the major differences that we should consider depending on how many players are playing?
Yeah, basically the way the game works is that the 3 parameters has to be satisfied. So it doesn't even matter how many players you are. The 3 parameters still have to be satisfied. So if you are in a 5-player games, it tends to be shorter in terms of generations, because now there are 5 players eager to terraform, as opposed to like a 2-player game. Then the game is going to go a lot longer in terms of generations, because now there are only 2 players to terraform everything, all 3 parameters. And right. This matters a lot actually, because it means that in 5-player games, you cannot get away with so much greed. You have to like really get your points pretty fast, because you just have fewer turns. But in 2-player games, it's much easier to just go for the big greedy engine and a lot of card draw and make a ton of points this way.
Right. So there's sort of 2 different approaches: the short push or the rush versus the longer game. And so in a higher player count, you're going to want to go with the shorter play style, correct?
Yeah, as a rule, yeah. Definitely, let's say the terraforming strategy, let's call it this, it's much better in 4 or 5-player games. So what you do is, instead of like getting a big greedy engine, instead of getting a lot of mega credit production, you still have to get a little bit, but then what you do is you get a lot of plant production, heat production, and you just go for straight TR, like a lot of asteroids and stuff like this. And you just try to get as many points as soon as you can, because the game is not going to be that long.
Very nice. Well, let's move to our number 2. Now, at the start of the game, you get some choice about which corporation to take. In your mind, which ones have the best abilities, and do you have success with any particular corporation?
There's a lot of different corporations. I think a lot of them are strong, but basically what I'm looking for initially is just what can give me the best amount of cards and mega credits and steel and titanium right here, right now, and then can the effect be beneficial to me towards the game? And then we also back to like player count, because for example, this Omni corporation, it's one of the worst corporations in the game. It's the one where you get, if you made a TR this generation, you can get 1 more TR for 3 mega credits. Like this corporation, for example, is only good in 4 or 5-player games, and even then it's questionable, but it's just completely unplayable in 2-player games, because it does so little for you. So but
sounds like it'll bleed your credits down too.
Yeah, but of course some corporations are stronger than others. Like there's a lot of good ones. Like if you're going for greedy game, like Vito or Point Luna or Manutech or something like this. And even in shorter games, these corporations are also solid. And then in 5-player games, I could tend a little bit more like, I think, Tharsis or maybe Omni, but even Omni is not that good there. So, I mean, all you have to do is just look at your 2 corporations, look at your starting hand, and also have the player count in mind, and just figure out what is best for you this game.
That's great. Thank you very much. Well, let's move to our 3rd point. And this is, I want to focus on the early game here. And with most engine builders, it's important to get your economy up and running quickly. So what thoughts do you have on how you should spend your credits in the early game, and when a player needs to focus on income generation?
Well, income generation, if it's a long game, you don't really know if it's gonna be a long game. It can like shape out in a lot of different ways. But generally speaking, if it's a 2 or 3 player game, you know it's gonna be fairly long in terms of generation. So in this case, the best approach by far is just to get some card draw, some mega credit production, some steel production, some titanium production, also TR to a lesser extent. But mostly you're just looking for stuff you can build a lot of cards with, and then you look for a lot of card draw. And if you can get these two things running, you can generate a lot of points in 2 player games.
Is it effective to balance your approach to this, or do you tend to want to focus on one or the other of these resources?
I think mega credits is probably the strongest, especially in these longer games. Even in 4 or 5 player games, I would still take the mega credit I can get in the early gaming. Like if you start with acquired companies, even in a 5 player game, I'll still play that. But the difference is in a 5 player game, you're also heavily relying on like straight TR or heat production, plan production, something like this. But
Right.
in 2 or 3 player games, it's all about the greedy card strategy. You just have to get a bunch of cards, a bunch of income, and then you go for the long game.
So how do you decide specifically which cards to take in those early rounds and how many cards to take? Is that based on their cost more, or is it based on the value that they add to your game or to your engine? For me, I look at all the options I have and I wonder, should I save my money or should I be spending it? What's your advice there?
Well, first of all, you should be spending your mega credits. It's generally it's pretty bad to just pass the generation with 20 mega credits. If you're doing this, it's only because you have like an expensive card like Iron Mining Industries or some other really expensive card that you want to play the following generation. So basically, you want to invest your cards as soon as possible. Yeah.
All right, so I'd like to ask you about those starting cards in the starting hand. What would you say is the ideal cost for cards that you're picking up early on when you don't have much of an engine built?
Basically, you want the cards that can pay for themselves in the shortest amount of generations. Like a card like Immigration Shuttles, this takes a little more than, I believe, 6 generations to pay for itself. It costs 30 plus 3 for the card, and it gives you like 5 mega credit production. So it could be tempting to look at this card, but this is almost too expensive. What you're really searching for is like, I guess, acquired companies or some of these bit cheaper mega credit production cards.
Nice.
But yeah, as a general rule, you want cards that can pay for themselves in 5 or fewer generations. Otherwise, it's not really worth it. But basically, you just have to play the best cards that are available to you. You have to play with the cards you get, obviously.
That's great. Okay. Well, let's move on to our 4th strategy tip. And part of the beauty of a game like Terraforming Mars is reading the options presented to you and choosing the best pathway. So I'd like to ask you, what are the main options or synergies that a player can focus on when they're deciding which project cards to pursue? Or perhaps I should ask, what are the primary and best paths to victory in this game? This is a huge question, I know. I'm sorry for such a big one.
No, I mean, you're completely right. Synergies is like a big part of it. So the biggest type of synergies in this game is pretty much like card discount. So if you have some card discount of a different variety, obviously you are trying to guide your game in that direction. But it's also like when you get your corporation, if your corporation is like Poseidon, then you're more inclined to go for colonies. If your corporation is classes, you're more inclined to go for cities. There's a lot of city synergy in this game, so if you get a few of these combo pieces that like boost your cities, Immigrant City or Martian Rails or something like this, then of course you maybe just go for cities this game. So synergies is like a huge part of it. There's a lot of different synergies, but mainly in the early game, in the opening hand, I think the synergy that I look for first of all is like, what can give me the most mega credit and card draw? Can I go for this card strategy, so to speak? Other synergies could be like I talked about, the city synergy is a big one. It could also be something simple like, do I have a little bit of heat synergy? Heat production is way better if you have like just a little bit of stuff that can like some of these discount cards are really good with heat production, for example, but it could also just be the case that you have boost for heat. There's also this card that can turn 5 heat into 3 steel or something like this.
Right.
So
Okay.
yeah, heat synergy, city synergy, and it could be a variety of other things.
Well, to me, that's what makes a really good game is that
Yes,
you can't just
exactly.
pick one strategy. That's why I love Puerto Rico because there's lots of different ways to win, and that's why I don't love Agricola because it's a very balanced. You can't just focus. So that's very cool. Well, moving on to our number five. One part of the game that I love is that the game gives you a goal, and that it just offers you a huge toolkit with which you can reach the goal, and it lets you figure out how to get there. So, at what point should you start thinking about other tools in your kit like milestones and awards? Is this an early, mid, or late game focus?
Milestones is I hate to keep beating this horse, but it really depends on number of players. Like milestone in 5-player games is like an actual race. You just have to get the milestone as soon as possible.
Mm.
And then it's like gradually changing. Like 4-player is also pretty important. 3 players, then I'm not really. I mean, you should always have milestones in mind. You should always try to get one of them. And when you look at the starting hand, this is also one of the things you should be planning ahead slightly. But it's not like a race to get all the milestones as soon as possible, because then you're just completely destroying your own game. It has to be one of the milestones that like come naturally to you. And
Right.
in 2-player games, it's really not that important. Like it could even be generation 6 or 7 or something before you even
Hmm.
consider milestones in a 2-player game.
Oh
But
wow.
that being said, they are of course really nice. It's getting 5 victory points for only 8, even though you have to get it this early. It's still very efficient. But
So
just don't buy 3 standard project cities just so you can get the Maya milestone. It's really not worth it. You have to
oh,
take
okay.
the milestones that are naturally on your path.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that is
Oh,
reminiscent of Wingspan. It's those end of round
yeah,
bonuses, right?
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's very
And
cool.
awards, you also asked about awards.
Yeah, are those a late game push for
Yeah, I
awards or?
think the 3 milestones are usually to be taken first. You can also start the first award if you're like really confident that you're gonna win it, but you really have to be confident. If there's the least like if you're not sure you're gonna win it, it's actually not worth it to start it so early.
Hmm.
But the first one, of course, it's only 8, so you could argue that one could be played in the early to mid game. But the one that costs 14 and the one that costs 20, this is mid to late game. I would even sometimes I wait until the last generation before I even think about getting the one that costs 20. Because the thing is, 20 mega credits and then you get 5 points. That's kind of good, but the math doesn't really stop here, because then you're also feeding a second place to your opponent. And most importantly, it could also be the case that someone just surprises you with a card or something, and then you are not even getting first place on that award. So you really have to be careful with these awards. They can lose you the game if you've spent 14 and 20, and then your opponent like stealing these 2 awards away from you. Then you
Right.
lost the game.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Well, let's move on to number six. This is opponents and timing I want to talk about here. This isn't really a game, in my opinion, where you can just put your head down and focus on your own board. So I wonder, to what degree do you pay close attention to what your opponents are doing and then change the timing of your play based on what they're doing?
Yeah, this is of course really important. The general idea of this game is that if you are having the best engine, if you're having like the best game, you got a lot of mega credit, a lot of card draw, then it's in your. If you're the big horse, if you're the guy who got all the stuff, then it's your opponents really should be closing the game sooner, because then like if you're going for the terraforming strategy, you're gonna make a lot of points in the early game, the mid game, and the late game. If you're going for the big greedy engine, then you're getting nothing in the early to mid game. Then you're only making point in the late game. So this is why it's really important for like the terraforming strategy to like close the game as soon as possible to really punish the greedy guy, because in the late game you cannot win against a guy who got all the cards and all the engine. So your only option is to close the game at this point.
Right. Okay. Are there any other counter strategies, specific strategies you could offer us? So, for example, if a player is placing greenery tiles, what can you do to disrupt that? And I should ask you too, is turn order important in terms of who's going when?
Yeah, let's take the first one first. If you're talking greeneries, you're probably also talking cities,
Yes.
because I think these two things are really linked. So in
Hmm.
order to disrupt the city guy, you could do a few different things. First of all, the easiest thing you can do is just play city synergetic cards yourself. Like if you're against Tharsis and he's building a lot of cities, just play pets, just play immigrant city, because this way he can still play cities if he wants, but when he does, he's also gonna feed you mega credit and victory points if you play pets. So that's
Nice.
the easiest way to counter it. The other thing you can do is just play exactly like 1 or 2 cities during the game, and preferably like in the middle of his empire. It also depends how many plane production you have yourself, but you don't really have to have more than 1 or 2 cities if you're playing against Tarsus. It's fine, as
Hmm.
long as you put it in the middle of his empire somewhere, to be really annoying. And then he's kind of got, in that case, he has to like give you mega credit or give you free VP because you're placing it next to his greeneries, and even if it's in the middle of his empire, sooner or later he will have to have greeneries because it's also gonna like touch his own cities, and then you're gonna get some victory points for free.
Right.
And the
Oh,
third
okay.
thing you can do to counter Tharsis is all of these special tiles, and it's the same idea as just placing a city in the middle of his empire. You could just like keep a lot of the special tiles and just be a little terrorist and just be really annoying.
That's awesome. And what about turn order? Do you pay attention to that much?
Yes, turn order is actually really important. It's important when it comes to bonuses. It's important when it comes to a lot of different things. Um, so if I know that I'm gonna start the next generation, and I also end this generation, maybe because I only took one action on my turn or something, then I'll have a lot of actions in a row, and that can actually be really impactful. For example, you can use this if you get like 4 or 5 actions in a row. You can use it to just claim a bonus or set yourself up to claim like both the bonus on the oxygen scale and maybe also the water. It's really funny when this happens. It's really game changing if you can get set yourself up to get both of these bonuses, for example. It's
Nice.
also like if you know that you're going to start the next generation, you can really plan, all right, can I just be greedy and wait until the start of the next generation before I actually buy the milestone or the award I want? Because if you learn to take into account the player order, then you can use this to actually maximize your efficiency. So instead of just, all right, I have 3 cities now claiming mayor, you could just wait until the next generation, for example.
That makes sense. That's awesome. So for our seventh strategy, I'd like to move to the mid game, and this is after you've got your foundational engine, you've got your trajectory in the game figured out. And since the game ends when Mars is terraformed, it's important that players pay attention to how slowly or quickly this is happening. So, what ideas would you offer on one, knowing when you want to move the game more quickly by advancing those tracks, and two, how to slow down or speed up the game?
Yeah, in terms of speeding up the game, then we're back to the thing we talked about before. Like if the opponent is the greedy guy with a that's often me actually.
Yeah.
So if I have the big engine, there are a lot of card draw, then my opponents should do what they can to close the game. And once again, this is like a lot more plausible in 4 or 5 player games. In 2 player games, I mean, my one opponent in 2 player, he can terraform as much as he wants. He's still not going to close the game that soon in a 2 player game. So it's definitely more a thing in 4 or 5 player games. But that being said, like if we're getting like to Generation 7 or something, and even in a 2 player game, if you can see that your opponent, all right, he still has 20 cards, I have 2 cards, then of course it is still in your best interest to try to close the game. To especially if you feel like you're ahead right now, but later on you're definitely gonna struggle. Then of course you want to close the game.
That's
And
great.
and what was the second part of your question or something?
The second part was how you slow down or speed up the game.
Oh yeah.
Do you have any clever ways to do that beyond just the, advancing the track more quickly or?
Yeah, in 2 or 3 player games, you can actually artificially make the game longer. This is like one of the really annoying little strategies you can do. But what you can do is you can just not spend your heat. Like you try to like identify the last parameter that is needed to close the game, and then you just never terraform that.
Right.
You're not
Yes.
you're not helping with the
Oh,
terraforming, because in
no.
this case yeah. So if you have protected habitat, what I've done a few times is that I just keep all my plants. I just don't use my plants for a long time,
Oh,
and
that's
then
dirty.
I make sure that the game goes to like 11, 12, or 13, or even 14 sometimes.
Oh, I
You can
like
also
that.
do it with heat.
Yeah.
Like just and the little side bonus is that for example with heat you can just if you did this and then you can see, all right, now the heat is kind of close to being closed, then you can use all of the heat you have maybe in the in yeah, you can use a lot of the heat you have to claim the bonus because you just stacked up so much of it. So it's also a way to get like the water bonus on the heat scale. And also, if the parameter is close to closing, of course, you want to be using all of the heat to get the last few available tier. But sometimes it matters more that you are efficient and just spend your plants and your heat, because this also gives you Terraform rating, so it also like helps build your engine a little bit. And sometimes it makes a huge difference that you just hold back these resources, because it could be the difference between going to generation, I don't know, 10 or 11, and in the 11th generation you're gonna make so much points if you are the greedy guy. So in this way you can also prolong the game. It's really annoying, but it can be really effective.
That's brilliant. I love it. So moving on to our 8th strategy, we also need to discuss standard projects. So are they worth the high cost? Are they useful? When should you be thinking about these? And would you consider these primarily endgame moves, or what's the best time to play them?
First of all, if you have standard technology, a lot of the standard projects are just solid, just by themselves. So let's get that out of the way. But let's assume you don't have standard projects, or standard technology, I think it's called, this card that makes standard projects cheaper.
Right.
But in the early game, I mean, if you're playing with colonies, then the colony standard project is really good. It's really good in the early game. If you can use it like on Luna, Pluto, or Ceres or something that gives you a decent amount of money income or something like this. So I think the build a colony standard project is really good. It's good in the early game, and in the mid to late game it can also be really strong to put it on Miranda or Titan, the one with floaters, or something like this. Enceladus. It can be really strong. But the power plant, I believe it's called. That one is it's. I mean, if you need it, you need it. It's you don't really wanna just build 3 power plants just so you can like trade, for instance. But if you have like 2 energy production, then it's a really good play to just buy the power plant to get the last few energy production you need, and then you can trade, for instance, like if you're playing with colonies. But even if you're not playing with colonies, if you desperately need a standard project energy production, then it's fine. Just don't just don't do it a lot of times, because generally the way the game works is that cards are more efficient. So standard projects, it's something you do if you have to, but you kind of hope that you get a card that can do this for you, but maybe you don't have the right card for the right situation.
So they can fill in the gaps in your luck.
Yeah, they can fill in the gaps, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And then we got if you're playing Venus, there is this for 15. I don't remember what it's called, but you can increase Venus 1 step. There's also this asteroid where you can increase the heat 1 step, and these 2 are terrible. they're really bad. You only use these if you really have a clear purpose. Maybe you have like Venusian animals, you need to pump up the Venus a little bit.
Or if you're trying to lose on purpose, then you could use those.
Yeah, I guess. Or maybe if you can get the bonus, like if you have 8 heat, if there are 2 steps to the water bonus on the temperature scale, and you have 8 heat, then of course you use 8 heat, and then you also buy 1 asteroid just so you can get that extra water.
Right.
Because then you pay 14 to get a water and a temperature, then it's good. But
okay,
as a general rule, you want to stay away from those. There's also like if you're really trying to close the game, if your opponent just has the bigger, greedier engine, and heat is the last one to close, then it's also completely fine to maybe pay for the last 4 heat just so you can play the asteroid standard project 4 times just so you can close the game. In this case, it could also be good.
Moving on to number 9, how much of this game is dependent on its tile placement or on the tactical level of the game? And when you're placing city and green tiles, is there a particular place or a certain way that you suggest doing this?
When it comes to playing tiles in general, there's this pattern where you place your cities and then you place the next cities, so that it can be like 2 greeneries in between your cities.
Right.
So it's almost like this pattern with triangles, if you know what I mean. So that's the first thing. But other than that, I think cities should be placed in a way so they have a space for a lot of greeneries around them. And also, if there are already greeneries on the map, then of course it can be good to place it next to those greeneries. And then you want to place it in a way so you can be next to 1 water or something if you want, but it's better to be like in the middle, and then you have greeneries, and all of these greeneries, they can touch the water, so you can get a lot of water bonus adjacency by placing your greeneries next to the water. But your cities has to be preferably a little more in the middle, so there can be 5 or 6 greeneries around them when the game is done.
Very cool. Now, what about edges? Do you want to have any tiles there, or is there ever a time to play around the edges of the board?
I just count how many greeneries can be around them. So if there are no of the really good spots left and you can only place it on the edge, well, then just count how many greeneries can be around it. Is there some water close by, some other resources, a card I can take into account or something?
Okay.
Does it affect the milestones or the awards especially? Like on the Hellas and Elysium map, there can be a lot of strategy where you put your tiles. In this case, if you're going for the what's it called, desert settler or the estate dealer or something like this. But the placing it on the edge of the map is okay if you have nothing better. But of course, if you're placing it on the edge of the map, it's probably only room for 4 greeneries around it.
Right.
6 would be better.
So for strategy tip number 10, one mantra or philosophy I've heard for Terraforming Mars is that, like the Killdeer and Wingspan, forests win games because they give you 2 points at the end, they raise your income, they score proximity bonuses, and they essentially pay for themselves really cheaply. So do you agree with this assessment?
I think plant production is really good, for sure. The way I like to do it, the way I think you should do it, is in the first generation and on the opening hand and stuff like this. You can keep plant production card in your hand, but really what you want before you start doing this is you want to get your engine up and running. So just spending the first generation only playing plant production, that's usually not good enough. But as soon as you hit the early to mid game, I think plant production is really good. I don't agree that you just. I think a Killdeer in Wingspan is a lot better than just having greeneries in Terraforming Mars. Like Ecoline, it's a fine corporation, but it's not auto win. It's like only an average corporation. Like it's more important. There's so many different things you can do. But greeneries only and cities is only like a part of it. But once again, we come back to the number of players because. Always it's good to have plant production, but the cities and plants, if you want to go all in on this, then it's better to do that in 4 or 5 player games. In 2 player games or 3 player games, usually the greedy guy, especially the greedy guy with a card strategy who just has a big engine and a lot of cards, that's usually way better than placing cities and greeneries. But once again, you have to play the cards you've been dealt. Like if you've, even in a 2 or 3 player game, if you've been dealt Tharsis with Immigrant City and you have some plant production, maybe something like this, then of course you go for it. But generally speaking, I think cities and greeneries are slightly better in 4 or 5 player games.
Okay. Well, despite my best efforts, I simply couldn't get the core strategies into 10 points. So we'll offer a bonus value tip here. And I'd like to ask you, if you reflect back on all the times you've won this game, where would you say the majority of your points have come from?
That's easy. I enjoy greedy games. So definitely cards. Because that's basically what the greedy card strategy is, right? You just have a lot of cards, and then you get a ton of points. You get them from Jovians, you get them from the number of your card, on the number of the actual cards when you're done with the game. You get it on all the stuff you have on top of your cards. So especially green tech synergy, that's a way you can make like a ton of points in this game. So me personally, I think these games are a lot more fun. So this is what I would aim to do, and I think if you are in a 2 or 3 player game, I think this is actually the best approach to the game. But if we're talking 4 to 5 player games, then it's just as good, maybe even better, to just go for terraforming or go for cities or something like this. Cities can be okay in 2 or 3 player game, but I think the straight off terraforming strategy, that's just not gonna cut it in 2 or 3 player games, I don't think.
Yeah.
But in 4 or 5 player games, just terraforming like crazy, try to close the game as soon as possible. That's really good in especially 5 player games.
Very nice. Now, out of curiosity, do you have a favorite card in the game? Pets has got to be up there.
Well, pets.
Pets? Do you like pets?
Yeah, pets. Pets is fun. Also penguins. I like me some penguins.
Nice.
It's a nice card. In terms of power level, it's there's some cards that you just know that these cards, you're always happy when you see them. It could be like advanced alloys, or there's actually, so you got Olympus Conference, you got Martian University, and also you got this card. It costs 10, gives you 2, make a credit production, and then you can draw a card every time you play a card with 20 plus cost. Oh, I mean, these 3 cards also stellar. These are always really good.
That's fantastic. Wonderful. Well, if players want to go into more depth too, I understand you're in the middle of releasing a series of videos on Terraforming Mars, and I think you explore a lot of these issues we've talked about today. Am I right?
Yes, for sure.
Excellent.
I went all in. I'm a perfectionist in the bad way. So when I do something, it's usually way too big for people's liking. But there's like, yeah, I made a lot of videos on my channel. It's gonna be I don't know 20 hours of content just for a Terraform Mars strategy guide. So
Brilliant.
it's definitely in depth.
Go big or go home. So we'll link to that in the
Yeah,
description. And thanks so much for sharing all of these ideas today, Boneless. It was a real pleasure speaking with you.
sure. You too.